before I start, I do want to give a disclaimer. The information that I have is information that I have obtained over the years, whether it was from cooking or learning to cook from an older person who's teaching me how to cook. I do not claim to be a professional, but I do like sharing and teaching everybody how to cook. So take my information and apply it to you, add it to what you already know, do whatever you would like to do with my information. Cooking with Marie. Come inside my kitchen and see what we're cooking up today. Hello, welcome to another episode of Cooking with Marie. Today we are going to talk about the science of food. I only have a couple of things to talk about, but there are a lot more for you to go and look up and do your research and get the information for yourself. And now we're going to start with number one, and that is measurements and having the right tools for the job. So you want to make sure that you have the proper measuring cups, spoons that you need to measure out your ingredients for your recipe. And they have dry cups that are single, where it's a cup or a 2/3 cup, a half a cup, a 1/4 cup, and a 1/3 cup. You can get it where there's a glass measuring cup and it has a spout for you to pour the liquids out. Those are better to use for liquid when you are measuring them. Just make sure that when you pour the liquids in, that you look through the glass at eye level to see the lines and make sure that the liquid is at the line of the size of the cup that you need for your recipe. Number two, there's quite a few with that one. So number two is going to be cooking methods. And there are many different types of cooking methods, but they're usually split into two general categories, which is wet and dry. Wet cooking is when you are cooking with a liquid. Dry cooking is when you are cooking without any liquids. So I'm going to start over a couple of dry methods. The first dry method is baking. And with baking, the food is usually cooked into an oven. You'll put it in there, and then of course the heat will rotate around the food, and that's how it's cooked. So that's baking. That's the first dry method. The second one is steaming. When you are using a pot to steam, you do put water in there, but the food does not go into the water. You'll have a steam basket, which you will put off into the pot. You'll put a lid on it, and then the steam will cook the food. So that's why it's dry cooking and not wet cooking, because again, the food does not touch the water. It's just the steam that's cooking the food. Number three, grilling. Of course, that is with charcoal, with gas, outside, and now we can do it inside with the grill pans that they make. And I've seen a couple of stoves where they have the grill made into the stove. Of course, they're very costly. But my favorite way is grilling outside. I guess it would be considered smoking instead of grilling the way that I enjoy doing it, because I like to use the big smoker. Put the meat on the grill, season it, let it sit on there and get all good and juicy and smoked. Number four, roasting. When you roast your food, the heat is applied directly to the food. The heat, it's on the outside, but you stick it in there, the meat or whatever you're cooking, and it's going to produce its own juices. So you'll put the meat into the pan that you're going to cook it in and cover it however you're going to season it. You season it and you put it in the oven, and as it's cooking, it'll start creating its own juice, and that's how it gets done. So, and when you are roasting food, it's better because most of the nutrients, they'll stay in the food because you don't have any water rinsing them out or anything like that. Okay, so now on to the moist heating cooking methods. When you are moist heat cooking, you'll use liquid in your food. The first one that we will talk about is boiling. When you are boiling the food, you'll put it into the pot with whatever liquid, whether it be water or chicken broth, vegetable broth, beef broth. You'll fill it till it's over the food. You'll put it on the stove, and the heat will heat up the water, and the water will start to boil, and that's when the food will start cooking. And you'll cook it for whatever length of time that it says to cook, and then it's done. The next moist heat cooking method would be stewing. With stewing, of course, that is putting your meat into the pot with the water to boil, then you put your vegetables in, or whatever ingredients you're going to add in there. If you're using vegetables, you want to make sure that you put them in at the correct time, because if you put them in too soon, some of them will get overcooked and you'll lose all the nutrients. Then if you don't put them in there in time enough, then they won't get properly cooked and you'll be eating raw vegetables, which is still good for you. But you want them to be done when you are making a stew. The next method of moist heat cooking would be frying. And when you fry food, of course, it's oil, it's not water, but it's still a liquid that you're using. So the heat is heating up the liquid, you put the food in, and it starts to fry. Whenever you are frying, you have two different ways, main ways of frying, which is deep frying and pan frying. Deep frying, you'll use a lot of oil. Pan frying, it's about an inch in the pan. Whenever you are deep frying, you do want to make sure that you follow some rules when you are frying foods. The first one is make sure there is enough oil or fat in the frying pan or deep fryer. Alrighty, number 2. The food cooked in oil, you want to make sure that it doesn't have any water dripping from it, because if it does, it could drip off into the oil and splatter on you and burn you. Number 3, when you're putting food into the oil, make sure that you do it carefully. If you have a frying basket or a spatula, those are big metal spatula. It's like round, it's like a fishnet, but you can put your food onto there and set it into the oil slow, and that'll prevent you from getting burned with it. Number 4, you want to make sure that the oil is heated to the right temperature. If your oil is not hot enough, the food is just going to sit in there and absorb all that oil, and then when you pull it out, it's going to be really greasy. And if it's too hot, you'll put it in there and the outside may get done and the inside is still raw. I do have 3 ways that I'm going to tell you that you can test it to see if the oil is hot enough. The first one is a thermometer. Of course, you just put your thermometer in there and it'll tell you what the temperature is. You want it to be between 350, 360 to fry your food. The second way is to use the handle of a wooden spoon or a toothpick. It'll work as well. You just stick it off in there into the oil. When the oil is hot enough, the bubbles will come up around the spoon. It'll be a little steady amount of bubbles that'll come up around it. If the oil is not hot enough, then the bubbles will be very, very small. It'll be like a little sizzle, and just let it stay and it'll heat longer, and then you test it again, and if it gets to the steadily boil bubbles, then you're good. Now if you put it in there and you get a whole lot of bubbles, like a real rapid bubbles, your oil is too hot. You want to take your pan off and let it cool down a little bit. And in the midst of taking it off and letting it cool down, you want to continue to try to do those little tests to see if it's working. The third way to see if your oil is hot enough is to get you a popcorn kernel. You drop it off in the oil and let it get to heating up. Once it gets to the proper temperature, the popcorn kernel is going to pop. And when it pops, just take it out and cook your food. The last cooking method that I'm going to talk about is basting. When you are basting food, you are just taking the liquids from the food and dipping it and pouring it over to what's cooking. That'll help it to continue to have moist in it and to continue cooking. The third food science that I'm going to talk about is hot food keeps cooking and resting heat maximize juices. Hot foods, when you take it off the burner, it's going to continue cooking. When you take it out the oven, it's going to continue cooking. So you want to, if it's some food that you don't want to cook any longer, like pasta when it's done, and you take it off, you want to take it off of the hot area and put it where it's in a cool area so that the cooking can stop. Now, as far as with meat, with the resting, that's when it's really, really important to remove your food from the heat and let it sit to the side and rest. So for about 5 to 15 minutes after you finish cooking your steak, you let it rest. Once you cut into it, it will be so much juice in there because the meat has cooled down on the outside and the juices have trapped on the inside. So that's how your meat gets juicy from letting it rest when you're cooking. This is going to end another episode. If you'd like to go over the things that I talked about, they're down in the description box. I'd like to thank you for joining me and ask you to like, subscribe, and comment. And I will see you next time.